terrific people, terrific panel, very important subject. We've been talking about AI, ML, digital transformation, is digital IT. I'm just going to point out that there are very, very, very few acronyms that have survived over 50 years of digital, technical, IT revolution. And the acronym that I'm referring to is GIGO. Garbage in, garbage out. And we can talk about the importance of generative, we can talk about AI and machine learning, but the fact of the matter is the quality of data is becoming more important in this environment rather than less important in this environment. And what I would like to do today is facilitate a conversation about what the most important things are to know and to manage and to lead around data as an asset. My name is Michael Schrage. I'm a research fellow with the MIT Sloan School's Initiative on the Digital Economy. The people I have here are first rate. I've got Morin, who's the CTO of JLL Technologies, Commercial Real Estate. I've got Girish Hoogar, who is the Global Head of Engineering for Lenovo. And I've got John Spens, who oversees data and AI in North America for Thoughtworks. We're going to do a couple of quick round questions, but the goal here is twofold: to have more of a conversation and an interaction. There's no search for consensus here, and we're going to use this conversation to, we're going to leverage and extend this conversation to you and to people on the Zoom for comments and questions, because I would like this to be a constructive and collaborative session. So the first question is going to go to Yao, and we're going to do quick rounds on this. And by the way, one of the interesting things you should know about her background is that she was at Intuit and StubHub in an earlier life.
Yep.
First question going around is, what's the thing that you fear or have discovered people most misunderstand about managing data as an asset?
Yeah. Okay, before I answer a question,
Sure.
I'm glad that I actually get a black belt in karate. So if we don't have a consensus, then we can actually resort to fist fight.
I would have picked you as an Aikido person, but
Okay.
I'm wrong. Okay.
Well, that's a misunderstanding.
Clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly.
Okay,
we will
what-
also talk about metadata, but yes, go ahead.
So, I saw this question and I was really trying to think of, to pick one of my favorite misunderstanding. I will start by giving you an example of like what occurs usually day to day, or whenever we start a new project, we'll be meeting with the stakeholders, product managers, we'll be talking about all the wonderful things we can do with the data that we have. But usually, the first thing that we say, oh, we'll just bring the data in. And then we can do A, B, C, and then all these wonderful things. I was like, wait a minute, just bring the data in? I think it deserves a little bit more than just one bring the data in. What I'm trying to say is like, a lot of the misunderstanding I think comes from the oversimplification of what it takes to make data into an asset. To your point, Michael, garbage in, garbage out. And it's not just bringing the data in. I would rather say we need to curate the data, which means we need to bring the data in, we need to transform it, we need to make sense out of it, we need to make it accurate, reliable, secure, and private. So that's why it's so complicated sometimes to actually really have that asset.
I will ask you a quick follow-up question.
Yes.
When you say to people, not just bring the data in, you need to curate the data, do they look at you like you're a nut or that you don't know what you're talking about?
You just have to say it with confidence, and then they think that you are right. No, I do need to explain a little bit, right? To use simple language to really make sure that people understand that, hey, it's more than just data in its raw form. So I'm sure a lot of you sitting at the table have similar experience of how to explain that to people who are not in the data field.
I'm going to ask one last quick follow-up and then
Sure.
go to John. Because I want to see how good your karate really is. I can easily imagine one of your stakeholders saying, Data is what's ever in our SQL, our SQL database. Make it work.
I have never.
Notice that they're all laughing here. I don't think they're laughing because it's funny. So go ahead.
It's not funny. That's why it's so funny.
That's why we're laughing.
Yeah, I think I think we need to help them to understand, right? I usually use simple examples like, hey, like if you, like there are data that come in different forms. If you want to query them, you kind of need to make it from text to table, right? And even things in your Excel file, you have to, it doesn't just come from, whatever we are getting from. So using simple examples, they usually are willing to understand and then willing to help us to achieve that.
We're going to follow up on that later.
Okay.
John,
Great.
what's been your experience?
Well, I'm going to follow on absolutely on that point, and I would say that the continuation of that is if you call it an asset, if organizations have assets, physical assets, those assets are maintained. And so many, especially from the finance group, you get the message of, well, we're going to come in, we're going to build this repository, build this platform, implement this tool, and then it's done. So I should see a year, maybe 2 years of investment, and then it's going to flatline again. It's like, no, it's an asset. You're going to need to maintain that asset and evolve it so that curation process continues throughout the lifetime, throughout the value of that data. So it's never going to completely stop. If it does, that just means people aren't using it.
My obvious follow-up for you, given the advisory work and your familiarity with this, what portion of the organizations that you work with actually have a ROD, return on data metric, to assess that they actually are getting value from this asset?
Yeah, that is a great question because so many times our data initiatives, especially the enterprise data initiatives, have been treated like a public works. We all want to get across the bridge, but nobody wants to pay for it.
Yep.
And so
Communism, computational communism.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so with our clients we've been working with the past couple of years is we've been working on a more decentralized approach and thinking about it from the use case is saying, okay, what is the value you're driving there? So it's still relatively small in my experience of those clients who can really point to the value of that data. And it's a challenging thing. Where if you're looking at sales data, there are a whole bunch of groups using it.
I just want to follow a quick one, and then to you, Girish. I want to push back because the prior panel, private equity, which is pretty much financial driven.
Price on everything.
Yeah, and one of the gentlemen talked about churn prediction. I have to argue that as the cost of compute has declined, as we have data lakes, data warehouses, whatever, one's ability to convert that data, get more value from that data, has gotten faster, easier, and cheaper. So I want to ask you, are organizations recognizing this, or is that purely a function of some business unit that has better BI or BA folks and says, we can do better churn prediction, let's dip into that data lake more effectively?
So I heard a big sigh next to me, just as you said that. So I'll do a quick answer on that, but I'd love to hear Girish's point. Yes, technically, we can move data faster. We can produce results quicker and process larger quantities of data. But going back to the point of garbage in, garbage out, have we addressed the biggest challenges of understanding what the data is, the curation process, knowing what it means, so that we get those results?
And your answer is no.
No, I think we're still at the same pace.
Be mean to the audience. What portion of the organizations that you work with get it?
Let me help John
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tag in.
It's all about, the patience coming from the business, right? So if you look at any engineering team, right, any technology team, they're all great at what they're doing, right? Everybody's doing an amazing job. But when it comes to the patience of the business leaders, that's critical here, right? That's important, right? So you can build a lot of data models, algorithms, right? It takes time to get to an accuracy point, right? 90% or 95% accuracy, right? So in order to meet those business goals, how patient is your business? That's very critical.
You're not patient at all. How patient is your boss?
Pretty patient when you reason out with him.
Is that because you train them or because they're smart?
Both.
I have actually an example that I use often to illustrate why sometimes it's hard to talk about value of data, especially infrastructure. Building the data lake, it usually costs a lot of time and money and patience, to your point, is that I use, hey, do you have plumbing in your house? They said yes, but do you ever go to house hunting and thinking about how wonderful the plumbing is? No, but like imagine a day your plumbing doesn't work, or you have no plumbing in your house. What do you see in the house? You literally have
Garbage in, garbage out.
or you have SHIT everywhere. Yes, literally, right?
Yes.
So to help them understand, the platform side is usually the harder part of demonstrating value because its infrastructure is like bridge, public work. And I find it more easier, especially if you have data scientist team, if you have product teams that, engineering team that really understand the value of data, you can definitely churn out products really quickly that demonstrate value of the data. But a lot of challenges actually is demonstrating why you need to put that much money into the plumbing.
Right. The biggest misunderstanding, right? Your first question, right?
Yes.
I'll tie it back to what you were saying, right? Is like companies right now, they think that by collecting data and sitting on it is the biggest value and not doing anything about it. That's the biggest misunderstanding. If you look back in history, right, without naming names, a rental company, a video rental company that went out of business, right? Because of the fact that they collected so much data, they had the data, but they didn't act upon the user behavior. And what happened? They went out of business, right? And then there's a cell phone company, which was #1 cell phone company, and they had so much data to act upon that the users want smartphone features. Didn't act upon. What happened? They went out of business. Many companies, even now, it is sad that they're collecting data, but they're not taking any action on it.
So I want to follow up with a question I didn't anticipate asking, and I'll do a quick through. Do you find yourselves more or less involved with helping the businesses come up with data-oriented, data-curated use cases to drive utility? And that way, you have the built-in negotiation between technical capability and business result.
Yeah, every time a product owner...
Give us an example.
Yeah, I'll tell you right away. Every time a product owner comes to engineering folks, right, the way we have trained them is, okay, what's the measure of success on this, right? Without the measure of success, go back, find out from the market, or do the analysis, come back to us and let us know. Because it's equally accountable and ownership from both sides. It's not just the product owner coming up with a feature and saying that, hey, I pulled the rabbit out of the hat.
Who reviews the measure of success? You in finance, and someone else? Who reviews it?
It's collectively. It's collectively done. It's, as a leadership team, it's
How
important.
long have you been doing that?
It's probably about 7 years now.
6 7 years.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest resistance?
The biggest resistance is from the business, right? They say that they have enough information to say that it's going to be a success. But when we analyze it, sitting and asking some questions, leading up questions like why you think this will be a success, we find out that we don't have enough information to back it up.
Last question on this before the next, which is, when you do that quote-unquote analysis, is it that the business did a bad job of analysis, or that their data sucked and they couldn't do the analysis?
See, everybody takes a decision based on the information that is currently available to them, right? And that, well, call it lazy or not lazy, right? They didn't go...
Call it lazy.
Yeah, let's say call it lazy, right? They didn't go back and do enough market research, or didn't talk enough to the customers to understand what they really want, right? You cannot... See, everybody is not Steve Jobs, right?
Let me ask, I lied. I'll ask you one last question before the second one, which is going to be related to this. To what extent do you believe that Lenovo, you're the head of global engineering, do the business units have access to all the data that they need to come up with a reasonable measure of success for approval?
That's a loaded question.
Yes, that's why I asked.
So I would say practically, probably we have about 70 to 75% access to the data that we need. Still, there's room to grow, definitely. There is some siloed data that we don't have access to.
We're going to come to the silo question
Right.
shortly.
So recently it has changed with the central governance system in place, which manages data across the board. So we are able to gain more access, but again, there is room to grow.
Thank you for giving an answer to that, because I want to start with the second round question. This first round took longer, but I certainly got more out of it than I had expected. Why do most data governance efforts fail? And relatedly, do you think CIOs are too involved in data governance, given that it's the business that needs to get value from the data? He says, leading the witnesses. Go ahead, yeah.
Okay. Well,
And feel free to dip into your StubHub and Intuit
Yeah.
experiences with Brad and those sorts of people, yes.
I think data governance is hard because it's not shiny, and sometimes it's more about policy making. It's more about guardrailing. It's more about thinking through all the risk that a company may expose themselves to do a good job. So it's a very thankless job, and it's almost sometimes invisible.
Who should own it?
In my company, the chief data officer owns it.
How long have you had a chief data officer?
I have been chief data. I recently got promoted. Thank you. As the chief technology officer. So I was the chief data officer at JLL for the past 3 years, and then before that, I was the chief data officer for StubHub as well. So I have been, as the chief data officer, I have been owning the data governance piece of it. The reason, I do believe that it should be the chief data officer's job. I don't know if everyone on in this forum agrees, but because chief data officer is responsible for building the platform, is responsible for a lot of the using the data to help the business to drive data usage. I think that chief data officers are in the right position to really.
So what you're telling me is, if there's no chief data officer, you're not going to have data governance.
That's not true. I think that if you do have chief data officer, it should be their job, because.
So whose job is it if there's no chief data officer, person who was the chief data officer at two companies?
That's a great question. I wonder if you guys have any answers.
Yeah.
John, feel free.
Yeah.
It's interesting because I do buy your point. If you have a good, active, engaged chief data officer, they can be that bridge between the business and technology. The challenge that I've seen where most data governance organizations have failed is when it's been treated as a technical initiative.
Yeah.
And the point is the technology individuals might be willing and excited and supportive of the efforts, but it's the business, it's the GRC function who really is able to say, listen, if that data gets out or if that data is misused or misrepresented, that could have the following ramifications to the business. And so what I've seen is technology groups try and employ and many times take standard policies around privacy and data retention and that, and just say, okay, these are the things we're going to do without actually addressing the big ticket items. So you need that. Now to your point, I do agree with this. I think it's interesting if you have that, if that CDO is empowered by the business, by the leadership. They are truly a C, and they have a leadership component. They can be that effective bridge between the two worlds. But if they're not, if they're strictly in the platform sense, then they're going to have the same problem as
Where
tech.
do you see it being well done?
Oh well, I'm gonna suck up to my clients out in the audience now. No, I've seen organizations. You talked about coming from Intuit, and I've found that to be an organization. The policies that they've adopted towards both managing their consumers and the consumption of data. I was talking to the current CTO recently and talking about how they're trying to, if somebody is consuming data, now they're also a producer, and how are we managing that? How is that coming back into the governance? How am I managing the outputs from it? So there's an organization that is doing well. Most are struggling.
Yeah, I think that if traditionally, you brought up a good point. It could be one as an enterprise function. However, the problem is at the enterprise level, sometimes they don't have the technology background
Right.
to really help with the quality of the data.
Yep.
Because data governance also includes quality. And just making policy, addressing the compliance and risk part of the data governance is not enough anymore. Going back to the big theme of our talk is garbage in, garbage out, and then quality and remediation are, I saw that as lacking in some of the more traditional setup of the data governance function.
We're going to come to you in detail in a moment on JLL because I have firsthand knowledge to say that commercial real estate is, shall we say, has a big skew in terms of data quality on this. But I want to deal with this issue in the Lenovo context.
Yeah, see, there are 4 key factors, according to me, that why data governance is failing, right? Complex IT infrastructure. Second is lack of ownership and accountability. Third is technology and tools that are required to do the data governance. And lastly, it is about not buying from all the key stakeholders, right? These are the 4 key factors why the companies fail in doing a better data governance.
And how did you guys remedy that?
See, first of all, every enterprise company out there, right, have an outdated infrastructure one or the other ways, right? That's important. First is have a roadmap set in a way that, of course, it's not an overnight change when you're going to change your infrastructure.
How good is your infrastructure?
That's a loaded question again.
I'm supposed to ask loaded questions.
From perspective of how good the infrastructure is, it's excellent. I would say it's excellent because of the fact that all the hard work that has gone in the last few years has gotten us to a place where it's strong, right, rigid, scalable, because of the platform that we are built. Because one of the things, it's a shameless pitch or plug, whatever you want to call it, one of the things that my team has done is it built a cloud platform, our customers and partners, right, which helps them to build solutions and applications that are 3 times faster to the market and 50% less costs. If they are trusting us, we better be scalable, right, and rigid, and as well as at the same time safe, right? So,
Please go ahead, John, and then.
Yeah, I want to jump. I think this is a great point because last year I was working with a financial services firm on a data governance platform. And the challenge that they're facing is just because of their size and scale, you can have those centralized policies, you can have those individuals at the business who have a very clear understanding of the challenges, but you've got so many dev teams out there building new reporting solutions, building integration solutions. Did you know that what you're moving is PII? It has to be encrypted at rest, encrypted in motion. So the challenge that exists out there is this model of how do we push that out effectively, especially as you get to scale.
Yeah.
And Lenovo is an example of that.
So I have to ask, not a loaded question, an obvious question. I was going to ask it later, but I'm looking at the time, and we're going to go to the crowd in a moment. But it is fascinating to listen to this conversation and not to hear the word metadata, particularly after your answer. So I'm of the, it is, and I will not go on a rant, I will just make an observation, that, inside joke, that I'm dealing with organizations for whom data governance is a real challenge, and they never talk about the labeling data, the data of data. And I just want to ask you, how do you get people, particularly given this push story, you have to be completely correct. There are dozens, if not scores, if not even hundreds of dev teams, and if the apps or processes, it'll be touching data, but it's like they don't know what, data, that's the stuff that runs on our system. Labeling it, not so much. So how do you get people to have some sort of conceptual symmetry, operational situational awareness between quality of data and the metadata that shape how we should behave around it?
Maybe we shouldn't call it metadata because it's so meta. And you need to make it real. Even though it's a joke, you need to make it real. And also you need to make it very easy. So the way that we do it is really templatize a lot of ingestion processes.
Repeat that statement. We,
We templatize.
yes, a
Yes.
lot of the ingestion process.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yes.
When did you figure out that you needed to do that? Was from your Intuit days? Was that from your StubHub days?
I was born with that. I think it was born. I couldn't recall when we came up with that. It was mainly born out of necessity. Otherwise, you can't scale. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to really enforce it because it's just really not on everyone's mind. Just like security, cybersecurity. You know, if you ask the developers, when do you ever think about it? They will probably, if they are honest, they will tell you when I have to.
When I'm on a DevSecOps team.
Yes.
I accept that. But
Yes.
let's go more on the template. You know, what's the actionable insight for templatizing for ingestion that you think organizations need to focus on? Because if they do that, and I'm sucking up to you here, if they do that, a lot of the data quality and data lineage issues go away because
Yeah.
you've
Go away.
templatized it the right way.
Yeah, so the insight is to really showcase what they can see. We have a data really public and not public, like within JLL itself, we have a very good way to visualize the information that we gather through having the metadata. And you can really have a dictionary to look at what kind of data you have in your data warehouses or data lake. And that really motivates people from, hey, I can
Is a
actually...
dictionary distinct or the same as a catalog?
I will call it this. In my book, it's the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So the cataloging and being able to look things up, being able to not have to, ask 10 people in order to figure out what's in the data lake
Right.
is actually pretty rewarding. And the dev teams understand that. And then they also want other people to use their data too.
Right.
And in order to enable others to use their data better have metadata, and then it's show up in the catalog.
So this is going to be such a softball question. So I hope that you hit it out of the park.
Oh, I
on
think
this.
Girish needs to answer that question because he has been getting loaded questions. I can't be answering all the softball
It's a form of favoritism, but he'll have a shot after this. The softball question is, do the business units understand what the ability to visualize that data means, particularly in the context of commercial real estate?
Yeah, absolutely. Because like our business, a lot
Told you it was a
of,
softball. Sorry.
yeah. A lot of our business users are actually very savvy data users as well. And even if they can't do the query themselves, they want to know what's in it. Like they want to understand, hey, how could I use, what is in our data lake that I can actually ask somebody to use it for us? So we actually have a lot of business users coming to our catalog to look at what's in it. It has been a really good motivation for them to require their teams, because like a lot of business users.
It's
Yeah.
a requirement now.
Yeah,
Very
require
good.
them to actually put in the metadata and help us to do documentation on the data itself.
Do you have that as well on both the supply
yeah.
side and the design side?
Just to add what you were saying was, right, there's actually a great success story in Lenovo, okay? IdeaPad is one of the leading low-cost gaming PCs that's out there, right? How that came into existence is a brilliant story, a success story. Like everybody knows that Lenovo sells this gaming laptops, Legion series, right? And when we were selling it, we found out that there were other set of users that were buying low-cost laptops and using it for gaming. Okay, there are serious gamers who use Legion laptop, but they're non-serious, but they use it for hobby purposes. They were trying to look for low-cost laptops, and that's where how IdeaPad came into existence. We disrupted ourselves. But how did we come to know about this? Is again goes back to your point. Is that we, like through telemetry services, we started collecting data and understanding the user behaviors, right? And we categorized this data in different categories to understand how the user was using the laptops for gaming, okay? And that is how we came about achieving it. If we didn't have a proper cataloging or user profiling or tagging the data in a better way, we wouldn't have landed up with this IdeaPad. device?
I think that's absolutely key, and it's sort of the value-added design version of churn, prediction of personae as opposed to prediction of whether somebody's going to leave. There was a question, it vanished off of the pad here, but I'm going to ask it, and it's sort of a token question. I'm sure people here will do a follow-up. But they're saying, you look at LLMs, you look at foundational models, you look at prompt engineering and LangChain, he says, dropping all manner of stuff. How do you see either fine-tuning or smaller models accelerating, maintaining, or disrupting the kind of data management and metadata management investments that have already gone on? And like people from the previous one, I use ChatGPT a lot, and I find myself having to label and put it in keywords and search. So I'm just sort of curious, as you're looking out, and it's particularly going to be relevant for, actually, it's going to be relevant to all of you. I'm just sort of looking at how does the rise of, not generative per se, but large language models that you can prompt or fine tune, change your data governance, data as an asset roadmap.
So I think I jump in on that
Please.
first. And I wanted to go back to that point really quick when you said, well, people aren't paying attention to metadata. I have to disagree. My clients we're working with are passionate about it. And to this topic, they're asking us, okay, let's think about graph queries, graph
Fantastic.
databases.
Neo4j, blah, 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 right, yes.
All of these tools, natural language processing. How can I make the process of asking questions more effective? So this is all building up to a set of tools that our clients are.
Forgive the interruption, but notice what you've done there. I can reframe what you've just said. That's the use case. The ability to ask certain kinds of questions is the use case, and that's the use case becomes the vehicle to force a reckoning around metadata and the quality of data that it calls up.
Right, absolutely, and that is what, again, from my experience, the folks we're working with are so keen on that. How do I break through?
What portion of your clients understand that?
Working in the data space, I would say
The ones whose bills are outstanding. What portion of them understand that?
Yeah, I would say a majority. In fact, we're being brought in. We're talking about how we're going to implement things. So the first conversation is about the metadata, the catalog. How are we going to make this self-service? How are we going to democratize data? People are now using what were buzzwords or just throwaway words, are now using them in anger, and they're saying we are really trying to enable self-service.
Wow. So self-service use cases are becoming more and more important in that regard.
Right.
Yeah, 100%.
You have a quick comment and then.
Well, I was going to answer your original question.
Answer the original question.
Okay, perfect. So I'm sure this is not just a real estate industry problem, but a lot of the data issues we have, challenges we have is, one is we actually cares about large amount of data, a large variety of data. I call the challenges we have is a wide data challenge, not a big data challenge, just because of
I like
all
that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the second challenge we usually have, and I assume that a lot of you also encounter, is we have a large amount of unstructured data.
Yes.
So those are the two main challenges. I see that a lot of the large language modeling and the generative AI technology can really help us to at least break down the barrier on the second challenge. Now,
So you're going to convert everything to Pinecone, do vector databases, and do
Yep.
embeddings and similarity searches.
Basically, you lay out my roadmap. I think, one thing is the large amount of unstructured data, such as in commercial real estate, will be leases,
Right.
term sheets,
Zoning,
yeah, a
real
lot,
estate.
sustainability regulations. Everyone has to come up with their own regulations, obviously. So all those large amount of information now can be really much easier to summarize and understand, and then can be self-serve.
Will you have, quick question then, Girish, will you be using fine-tuning to train models to label your data?
Absolutely, we are going to use fine-tuning because the kind of data that we have are not available publicly.
Right.
And I believe that in this new day of age with generative AI and large language modeling, a lot of the different companies are going to use their private data to fine-tune the large language model and provide context and construct, really good prompts so that we can really leverage the generative AI capabilities.
Is that your roadmap as well, Girish?
Yeah, of course. Just to add, right, great points, right? Just to add to what they said, some of the products that we are building with Lenovo, right, requires us to definitely fine-tune, right? Fine-tune our data because we are trying to be proactive and telling our customers when your device is going to go down, okay? And tell them that, hey, a certain update needs to be done for your device to continue to be productive.
So update, predictive maintenance, next best action, you're trying to bake that in.
Yep.
And how's it going?
Awesome. So
That's the metadata version.
right.
Now be a little more granular for
so
us.
it's
Give us the use case. where it's-
obviously, right. For example, the name of the product that my team is building, it's called, which Thoughtworks, our partners, are helping out to build it. It's called the Lenovo Device Intelligence. Okay, what it does is for an IT admin or a business owner, have a single pane of glass, a portal to manage all the thousands of devices, right? Telling them exactly how each of the devices are behaving, right? If one of the device needs a driver update, if you don't get that, you might land up in a blue screen of death. So it preactively flags it and tells them that, hey, an update is required. Okay, they can remotely boot it up and get it back up and all that stuff. So all this information.
So not just a dashboard, a predictive dashboard.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what is going on.
Gentlemen.
Ali Karimi from IEEE Standard Committee. I believe I'm going to tell you the scenario, and I want to ask you guys your opinion. We believe that by 2 to 3 years, the data lake, or we call it dirty data lake, is going to be gone. Everything as far as the AI and analytics goes to the edge of every enterprise. Example of that, you guys have mentioned the healthcare. When the patient goes to ER, they would have their own AI and analytics. Then the patient goes to ICU, they get that data, then ICU would have their own analytics and data. Most of the problem we do have today, it would be resolved by the edge because it's cost effective. The CPU set is going to be more powerful at the edge. And right now, Google and Amazon, they're going in, they notice that they're going into the big customers. They want to put their servers at the edge. I want to know your opinion regarding that.
Is the future in the center or the edge for this? I think there are certain handoff issues that emerge, which we can talk about, but that's a completely legit scenario. Who would like to take a shot?
I'll take a shot. So to begin with, right, the accuracy of what the gentleman is asking, right, whether it is the ER or it's whether it is the ICU, right, the accuracy of the data matters a lot, right? If you don't have a large set of data and you haven't trained your models on that data, I don't want to be in that hospital for sure, right?
Yeah.
So that becomes very critical, okay? So in order to achieve that, the companies need to be unselfish, okay, when it comes to health sector. This is my own personal opinion. The data that people are sitting on, there has to be some data that is not confidential enough that can be shared across the board, right? Like open source communities. I've barely seen any open source communities for data, right? Where the data, non-confidential data is shared for the bettering, like healthcare sector.
We'll do the repeal HIPAA session another time. Go ahead, yes.
But what I'm trying to say is that, to answer your point, right, definitely, but what is very critical here is, what are those data models that people are utilizing to train the data? How much data is available, right? That's very critical. There has to be certain intelligence or certain rating given to those data, right? That you can confidently use it.
So architecturally, the gentleman has a point, but in terms of data governance and data quality, show me first on this.
Right. Yep.
John.
Yeah, I think that the way you summarized it was exactly what I was thinking, is we're talking about the physical the compute capability and where it exists versus the ability to consolidate the data from a model or conceptual process. Obviously, we would all, when we started doing data warehousing, why? Well, because you couldn't run those analyses against those transactional systems. We haven't yet overcome that need sometimes to pull data together, to consolidate it from certain locations. But from an architectural, from a technical standpoint, if we're pushing out that capacity, that calculation, the compute, the managed capacity, we want to take advantage of that.
Yao, I could easily see you doing an experiment where the real estate agents have their own tablets and it's
Yeah.
pushed out to the edge, and you have all these federated agencies. So you would be an interesting beta for that kind of computing on the edge, intelligence at the edge approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can draw a lot of analogy with the sensor technology, right? The IoT of various things.
Or BIMs.
Yeah. So I think there are a lot of real-time computing and analytics that you can do on the edge, but at the end of the day, you still would want the context, right? Not just like all the data, but the context of like where this data point is. And I think there's still going to be, maybe we are going to be more on the hub and spoke kind of model where there are large models that are going to train on a larger data set in the center, but a lot of the smaller computation will go to the edge.
Excellent. Lady over there, can you stand up just so they can see you?
I'm wondering if you can talk about your definition of data. When you say, well,
Talk about
well,
defining one's terms, sure.
yeah, I'm just really curious because when you've been talking about data, traditional data seems to kind of flow through my mind, but there's a lot of other types of data these days. There's content, there's contracts, everything has been digitized. So can you talk a little bit about what data means to you?
I can't think of a better way to end by defining our terms. Who wants to go?
I'll let you start.
I think, oh man, I love this kind of questions. That's a loaded question, I think.
There you go.
Like,
Thank you very much for getting me off the hook. Yes.
Right now, my world, everything from contracts to interactions to whether someone go to a conference room, sensor data in commercial real estate space, they're all data to me. I would love to collect them all. Also, as my earlier point, we have a wide data problem for commercial real estate where I want to know if you have an office building in a location, do you have daycare center there? Are the teachers in the daycare center, are they nice or not? So to me, all those are data, and then I would love to be able to curate them and organize them so that we can actually really help clients to make informed decisions.
I think in a simple way to answer that, right, you explained it brilliantly, right? For me, anything that is digital is data.
Yep.
As simple as that.
Right, I still adhere to the old, that classic information pyramid. So everything, data is just those individual quanta, whether it be a contract or it be the number of orders that came through. So this is all available to us to consume, and it's then taking it, providing the context, the curation process to turn it into some sort of information. So the wider the net you're casting, now of course we're using video or we're using audio, we're using different components. We're pulling information out of that. So you cast a widest net as possible.
I'm, in honor of the fact that there was analog before digital, and looking at the time here, I'll give my old-fashioned definition. A data is an element that's part of a pattern. You're collecting data because if you're a Bayesian or a frequentist, it's part of a pattern. Large language models are probabilistic. They work because we've scraped everything and they're statistical issues. So Gregory Bateson once had a wonderful phrase that information is any difference that makes a difference. Data is the stuff you collect to assess whether there's a difference, whether it's in analog form or digital form. I just want to say, I thought you guys were terrific. I'm glad that we didn't come to an agreement even on the fundamental definition of data, but I think that there's a lot of useful insights and actionable ones that people can take away and act upon, and we'll be here to answer any questions one-on-one or informally for the next little while. Thank you so much for your time and attention and your questions and comments. Cheers.